click on resource links and things you may see on here right now, you can go ahead and do that. But we'll take just a moment to introduce ourselves, and maybe we'll go bottom to top since I'm the one talking here. First, I can introduce myself to you. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Newton, the coordinator of Assistive and Instructional Technology at the TTAC at Virginia Tech, and was a former special ed teacher and ITRT in the Roanoke City school system for a number of years. So I kind of come from that blended background of special ed and technology, and enjoy getting to do events like this and talk with teachers and serve those in my regions now. So Nikki, did you want to say hi to everybody too before we work our way up?
Sure thing. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. And I'm a trainer and technical assistant. Sorry about my dog barking in the background. Trainer and technical assistant at AIM Virginia at George Mason University.
Okay. And I'll jump in here too. I'm Sharon Jones. I'm the floating head on the screen. And I work at the TTAC at VCU, and I'm also the statewide AT and distance ed coordinator. And my background started many years ago as I worked with high school age students, and then dropped down to middle, elementary, preschool, and then did some work in early intervention, which my love was working with families. Then I have always used assistive technology, even before it was called assistive technology. So I'm really, really thrilled to be here with you all today. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, that's a little bit about us. And, you know, we also know who we really are to you guys right now is your very last session before the finish line for lunch. And you've had quite a bit of information I know that's been shared with you this week, lots of good stuff that you're going to want to take back and apply in your classroom pretty soon. So we're going to try and keep our information concise for you. And if you hear my voice, you'll know I'll try to speak concisely today before it goes away from me entirely from speaking quite a bit over the course of the last week. But we're also going to share some resources with you too that you'll be able to take away, knowing that many of you are probably, maybe you're working this summer, but you're probably not going to apply a lot of this stuff tomorrow, especially with the holiday weekend coming up, and maybe a little while before you get back to this. So we're going to try to package some supports and things to you that you'll be able to grab when you get back in the classroom on a regular basis. But as far as today's agenda, for what we're going to look at, we're going to address some topics about how we include students with disabilities in English classrooms. I know you probably covered that topic and idea a lot over the course of the last 3 or 4 days, but we're going to take a real specific look at ways to do this using universal design for learning and assistive technology tools. So that will be what separates us from the pack. And then we will end up with some resources that you can link to get more information. But with group we've talked to over the course of the summer so far, we've liked to play a little game. We like to try to get you involved with what's going on here. And so if you take a look at these pictures here, can anybody, you can drop this in the chat box if you want to make an annotation on the screen, if you know so with your annotation tools through Zoom, if you know who one of these writers or authors with the disability is, go ahead and drop that in the chat box now or make a mark on the screen. I'll take just a second to take a drink here.
Yeah, got Christy Brown, Alice Walker, yes. Well, you guys are good. Oh, think hard on the one on the left. Alice Walker, correct. Oh, you've seen that face on many books. No, not Helen Keller this time. We talked about her earlier this week, though. Alice Walker, lots of votes for Alice Walker.
All right, Sharon, should I reveal the, oh, Justin got it.
You reveal and I'll share a little bit about these folks here.
They're very close, but I'll move on. I'll give you the answer.
Oh, there we go. So Agatha Christie was an English writer known for her 66 detective novels and 14 short story collections. She also wrote the world's longest running play. Do you know what that is? Put it in the window if you know that one. 2 more seconds. Mousetrap, a well-known play there. So Agatha Christie had dyslexia. And I did not know that before we started this. So that's interesting information. Christy Brown, many of you guessed, was an Irish writer and a painter who had cerebral palsy, and he was able to write and type only with the toes of one foot. Does anybody know what his most recognized autobiography was called? And it was also made into an Academy Award winning film. 2 seconds. It was called My Left Foot. Yes, exactly. There you go. So many of you have seen that. Great. Jules Gabriel Verne was a French novelist. He was a poet and a playwright, and he wrote Journey to the Center of the Earth, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Around the World in 80 Days. And Jules had ADHD. By the way, Mark Twain also had ADHD. So there's another author in there with a disability. But I have to share, when I was a child, we had the album collection of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and we would sit around our living room and listen to that story on the record. At that time, the vinyl as it's called now. And it was amazing just to listen to the narrations and the background music, Creatures Under the Sea. The last one is Alice Walker, and many of you guessed her, and she's an American novelist and a short story writer, a poet and a social activist. And she, in 1982, published the novel The Color Purple. And so for which she won a National Book Award for hardcover fiction and the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. She was blind. So she was blind in one eye. And because we don't always emphasize to our students that these famous writers had disabilities, they often don't recognize these writers as role models and understand that I too can be a writer, and despite whatever disability I have. So we hope you appreciated that little writer's piece there.
Sharon's right. And I have to say that, I believe Agatha Christie and Christy Brown and Jules Verne were all born with their disabilities. Mm-hmm. And I know that Alice Walker, her brother actually shot her in the eye with a BB gun when they were little. And that's how she ended up being blind in one eye, which, that is a terrible thing. I can't help but think of the Christmas Story a little bit when I hear that story too with that. But she is, disabilities, you can be born with them, or you can have them along the way in your life. You can be acquired. So with that, but, as we think about role models for students in English, and like Sharon's mentioned, that they would be able to see these folks as somebody they could aspire to being if they were really involved in being able to read and write and participate in the literacy despite their disabilities. I think that would be an amazing thing, because did you know there are approximately, not exactly, but approximately 164,000 students with disabilities that are receiving special education services throughout the state of Virginia. And that's roughly 13% of the total student population. So odds are, if you have that 20 to 30 person classroom that you're working with now, there's going to be at least one or two students, maybe even more, that have a disability that is receiving services like this in your room. And you probably know that already. But another number that you might not know is, out of that 164,000 students, about 8,200 of them are only about 1/5, 1 in 20, are receiving support through some type of assistive technology. There are a lot of reasons behind that. We'll touch on that briefly, but I don't know about you, but when I see the number 164,000, and then I only see 8,200 receiving AT services, again, rough approximations and statistics there, makes me feel like we're missing the boat somewhere, that some students are missing some supports that maybe they should be having. And we need to try to bust myths and lack of knowledge and information in certain areas about these tools and supports. And that's part of why we are here today. But when we get together in a large group like this, I think when I joined the room, there was 65 or 70 people here with us. It's good for us to lay kind of a foundation of the term assistive technology, because a lot of folks know what it is. Some people kind of have a notion of what it is, and some people, this may be an entirely new term for you. So before we go much further, we want to lay the foundational groundwork here of what we're talking about. And AT in the US Code, in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is defined as any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether it is purchased off the shelf or you modify or customize something that's used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a child with disability. That is assistive technology. And if you can kind of wrap your head around that $64 terminology there, what you boil down to is it can really be anything that's out there. It could be a sophisticated piece of computer hardware or software, or it could be something as simple as a pencil grip. If it helps to increase and support and maintain the functional capabilities of that child, then it's going to be assistive technology for them and should be documented as such. In this field, because it is so broad, what can be categorized as assistive technology, we try to kind of put some measuring sticks or marker posts or benchmarks around it, so that we can understand such a broad concept. And one way that we do that is by organizing assistive technology tools on a continuum of low tech, mid tech, and high tech items that students can use. And you can see how those are sort of organized here. And we generally suggest that if you're working on assessing and considering AT for a student that you're working with, you start at the low tech end. Try the simple things first before you move up to the higher tech items, because they cost less. Obviously, they take less training for the student to learn how to use, and for those supporting them to learn how to use it. And if it breaks, you'll be able to easily replace these things. So that is one way you can kind of organize your thoughts around the idea of what AT is. But I mentioned a little bit earlier, again, with the 5% of students that are using these tools that are receiving special education services, there's got to be a reason why we're missing that boat, right? And just a little background too, from what I and Sharon and Nikki all see, is there are some myths out there in the school system that we like to bust about using AT for students with disabilities and working towards our IEP goals. One of the big ones that's out there, and if you're attending a content teaching academy in the summertime, this is probably not you, but there is a myth out there that assistive technology can be a form of cheating for some students. That being able to have text read aloud, being able to have extra spell check and grammar check in their writing may be a form of cheating for them when other students aren't receiving that type of support. And that is something that we have to work on changing the mindset of folks with. Another big one is that assistive technology should really only be considered to support students in English, in science, in math, and whatever subject matter we're talking about as a last resort. After we've talked about everything else, we've considered every other support, whether that is a paraprofessional, whether that is a different, more targeted curriculum that they can work with, or something that's modified. After all that's been tried and failed, well, I guess we'll start using assistive technology to try to start helping them, when it was kind of the last thing we wanted to do, because sometimes maybe it has some stereotypical connotations that go along with it. But I would encourage you to think about yourself and the technology that you use to support you throughout the day, whether that's keeping you organized with your Google Calendar or something like that, or paying a credit card with your Apple Watch when you're at Starbucks or something like that. And those sort of supports will lend themselves to all sorts of different environments. So another thing that we try to bust as we were discussing AT with different folks, and not so much of a myth, but something that we run into that is very real, and we think is probably the biggest reason why a lot of teachers and IEP teams working with students don't address assistive technology, and why the participation rate is so low, is that teams and teachers and students and families, they just don't know. They don't know what AT is. They don't know what's available out there, what might be appropriate for them, what they might qualify for them, or how it works. And we're going to try to rectify that, starting with some of the discussions that we'll have today. But while I have a break again for another drink here to relieve my scratchy throat, we're going to turn it over to you for some participation again before we move into the next section, and trying to kind of gauge where you are with your knowledge of AT. If you'd like to use your annotation tools in Zoom to mark where you find yourself on this column. What do you already know about AT? We got some people kind of in the middle there. You've heard about it and you know a little. You use some with students and you want to learn more, or you use it quite a lot. Take a minute here, and I see some people putting their marks in there. Everybody's kind of in the middle so far. And I'm going to take a quick drink.
This is really great that you're kind of in the middle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. We know that you are knowledgeable about the foundational stuff, and we can kind of move forward with something a little more complex.
And thank you, Heather, for always being willing to learn more.
Absolutely. All right, great. It looks like we mostly fall in the middle. So thank you for getting that in there. A few folks have used it a little more extensively. That's not surprising in a big group like this. So that is good to see. Let me get back my navigation here. And we're going to go ahead and get started with digging into AT and what teachers and teams can do with this. One thing, again, we talked about mindset with you when we get to these tools. And ooh, everybody looks like Gail and some other folks want some coffee right now. They're checking on my side coffee maker there, my Cafe Corso. I know you guys have talked a lot this week in this academy, likely about high leverage practices and in special education and things that you can do as teachers and professionals that will really impact the students that you have in the classroom. And there is usually a debate. And again, kind of one of those mindsets and thoughts people have out there about technology, whether it's the Chromebooks you have or tablets or a specific assistive technology that students have, that whether it's just a nice to have, a fringe benefit, or whether it is actually an HLP. Is it that fancy Cafe Corso that's over there, or is it that workhorse coffee maker there, the Black & Decker or the Mr. Coffee that we have kind of going on over there on the side that gets the job done without all the frills? Well, you probably know where I'm going with this. And if you've looked at the book before, you know that it's there, but a little bit further down the list. It's not number 1 or number 2, but HLP 19, which I like to think is higher up the list. It's got more points, right? Is the use of assistive instructional technology in this. So the idea of using these tools with students with disabilities has a research and evidence-based foundation behind it. So when you are encouraging or working with your co-teacher or talking in administration about why you want to do this more, you have the backing of research and evidence as you're doing it. It's not just something you want to do because it looks nice and because technology, right, is going to save the day with things. There's actually reasons behind it. But it's one thing to say that there is an HLP for it. Implementing those high leverage practices sometimes can be challenging. And I know as a teacher, when I was in the classroom, I liked having a roadmap or a checklist to kind of know that I was doing these things in the right order and in the way that I intended. So Taylor in 2020, an author in the Journal of Special Education Technology, has developed a 6-step framework for teachers who want to include and incorporate assistive technology into their classrooms, into their inclusive English classrooms, again, science classrooms, math classrooms, whatever subject matter you happen to be working in. And the 6 steps, it always throws me off because there's 5 arrows and 6 steps. I'm like, is it 5 or 6? But it's 6 steps are knowing the AT and the student's IEP, being able to evaluate how they're doing with it in your classroom, both you special education teacher and you general education teacher, considering your lesson learning objectives, how the AT fits in, your plans for how you're going to fit it into the lesson, and then implementing your lesson, and then looking back at how did it go? Did the AT work for that? Do I need to modify my lesson? Or man, we need to look at different AT for this to be able to work for the student. And in doing this, we're going to kind of take you step by step through these in just a little more detail and give you some suggestions along the way as well. Kind of the first step, and this is the broadest step that we're going to look at. So it's going to be long, and the other ones are kind of combined and shorter. But we see this as being the real first hurdle for teachers and co-teaching teams to be able to get over. And it's about knowing the AT that's in your student's IEP, number one. And there's a few different layers to that. And I found some data as I was researching to make this presentation for this summer. And this isn't just Virginia, this is nationwide data. But I thought it was interesting to put up there that, you know, just a little bit more than 30% of teachers, gen ed teachers, report to referring to their students' IEP less than once a month. And there could be a lot of reasons for, again, why that number is that low, but something to think about in doing that. And even 6% of gen ed teachers report only looking at their students' IEP when they get it the first time at the beginning of the year to review it. And then again, when that IEP meeting comes and it's time to review those annual goals and objectives and supports. So again, that's small, but we need to be able to address knowing what's going on, in this case specifically, AT that's in your student's IEP. What I want to do with you now, and I'm going to make a teacher faux pas here because I'm going to encourage you to go look at something else on the computer while I'm talking. But this is a shortened link, and there's also a shortcut to this website in the Day 4 AT UDL folder that will take you to our UDL AT Playground website. And I'm going to go there too on my screen. But if you'd like to join along with me and go through this and look at it, we have tried to, once again, consolidate a lot of information into one place for you. And there's going to be AT suggestions for reading and writing. You'll see math and science and some other areas up there too. But if you go there, this is a place where you can find, and I should just go ahead and pop out of my screen here and show it to you, where you can find consolidated information about assistive technology tools all in one place. We know it's challenging to teachers sometimes in that they will hear about maybe read and write for Google and think it's a really cool tool. Maybe your division has it for everybody, maybe they don't. And then maybe you don't know that teachers can get a free license to this to try it, because that information is way off somewhere else, not even in the same, on the same web page or in the same area as the information you're looking at. This page will help you. And yeah, Sharon, would you mind to drop that link in the chat for this? You can go to this, and we've done things where you can click on read and write, find out information about it, go to the link where you can find out that it's free for educators, and even see demonstration videos and things like that on there. And you can see snap and read, and you can go down. Oh, we got some check marks on here. People like this. That's good. Options for mobile apps, to text to speech options and that sort of thing are here with links as well. Demonstration videos, reading pens. And again, knowing that you are going to be taking this information and using a lot of it later, this website is going to stay up for as long as Google will let me have it up. On the website here to be able to do that. And then there's writing information over here as well, whether that's speech to text and dictation, how to set those up on your computers, and even oftentimes what your students already have, a guide to teaching the use of speech recognition tools with your students, and word prediction, and a lot of other things. And, you know, I wish a lot of times we have a longer period of time with you all that we can demonstrate more deeply some of the tools, but with the short time that we have today, I just want to show you where they are, because you really will learn these best if you go into them and try them yourself, to be able to look through these and practice and play. That's how I learn them. And I guess I project and assume that's the way a lot of people learn best when it comes to different softwares. So there again is the shortened link, and thanks for Sharon for putting that in the chat box for us, for folks to get to that. And remember, it's also in your Google Drive folder as well. Maybe because of the sake of time, since we got started a little late today and everybody had a bathroom break, which we're really glad about, we want to ask you to do this activity right now. but would encourage you later on to take a look at the accessibility features in the devices that you have. A lot of us learned in the past year that there are these features in our computers as students were forced to work remotely, things that they can use that are built into the operating system of Chromebooks and Windows PC laptops that can help support reading and writing, and idea formulation that don't require a software download or approval or somebody else to do this or a purchase. It's already there and they can do it. So depending on what type of device you might be looking at, take a look at the accessibility features that are in there. One last kind of plug I want to give from the knowing what types of tools are in your student's IP, familiarizing yourself using that website resource to say, okay, Jenny uses Snap and Read, or she uses a word prediction software like CoWriter. I can dig into this and find out more about it now, about where I'm missing my knowledge and how I can support her. One other thing to remind you of is the idea of captioning videos in doing this. And I think a lot of us got on board with this last year as well. And I kind of demoed this with the science group the other day, and they thought it was funny because I kind of gave it away. I started playing the video, and it was a science song for them. I thought it'd be good to Raven for my secondary English teachers here to be looking at this, but I tricked them by hitting mute and then playing it. And you would imagine all these science teachers, they popped up out of the woodwork in the chat room. I wasn't sure they were awake. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, you muted it. We can't hear it. We can't hear it. I was like, I gotcha on that, because if you're putting videos on your Google Classroom page and your students have a hearing impairment, this is what they're experiencing unless you have the captions on so they can read and follow along with what's happening on the video. And it's a little thing to think about. But again, from a UDL standpoint, you're impacting your students who are also at home learning with brother and sister, and it's loud and there's 50 of them and all of that. Yeah, and they can add it to Zoom too, Heather, you're right. Captions and universal design, they just go hand in hand. They're like peanut butter and jelly, right? With this, as a parent of small children, I watch a lot of caption TV about 9:30 at night, so we're not waking anybody up, right? In doing that. So just remember your captions when you're making your materials accessible. And as I'm talking about material accessibility, that's my segue to take a nice long drink here and turn it over to my friend Nikki, because what do we call accessible instructional materials here in Virginia? We talk to our friends at AIM Virginia for it, and Nikki's directly from there, and she's going to take a little time to address what they can do for you here as well when it comes to materials and AT for your students. Nikki, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you, Matt.
All right.
I'm here taking notes too. This is very informative. So let's go ahead. Thank you. All right, so we know that success in school largely depends on understanding text and comprehension, and most struggling readers know that they struggle, and when they struggle they tend to lose confidence and they'll eventually become reluctant readers. They'll just check out, and as you can see here on the screen, we have one student who's just slouched. He's just disengaged, and so this is what our struggling readers experience. And research has shown that there is a gap. So we expect our students to perform on grade level, but that's not really the reality for many of our struggling readers. Again, research has shown that by the time students reach the second grade, that performance gap just begins to widen. And by using accessible instructional materials, we can actually help to affect that gap. And if you think about it, up until the fourth grade, we're focusing our attention on helping our students learn to read. And then we make the shift and focus our attention on teaching our students how to read to learn. Is it not? Oh, there we go. Thank you. Teaching our students how to read to learn. And then again, many of our students just struggle to make that shift. And that cycle continues. And before you know it, your students feel defeated and they will disengage.
Yeah, Nikki, just tell me if I missed something on it. I'm
Could you
modeling
hit it one
problem
more
solving
time?
here for everybody.
That's all right. Hit it one more. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. And here's just a brief video on accessible instructional materials and what AIM Virginia is all about. And I'll talk more about AIM Virginia in a moment.
Accessible instructional materials, or AIM, are printed educational materials that are converted into accessible versions such as Braille, large print, audio, or digital files. Let's take a quick look at how digital AIM, combined with the right hardware and software tools, helps students read. This everyday math book was sent to AIM Virginia and produced with accessible text. Students are able to listen to the text using a feature called text-to-speech that pairs the text a student sees with the audio they hear.
Arrange the allowances in order from the minimum, smallest, to the maximum, largest.
Students can also control how the text looks on the screen by customizing color, text size, typeface, and spacing of the text. Research says these options can benefit students with various disabilities, but also give students a large degree of control over their reading. The second example shows how AIM can be used to annotate documents by drawing shapes, typing in answers, or highlighting text. For students that also have difficulty with writing, they can answer questions with an audio comment.
There are 6 boxes.
Or a video comment.
There are 3 boxes.
Teachers can also leave video or audio notes for a student to further enhance their reading experience. When using AIM, consider this. Just as a DVD player is pointless without a DVD, so is reading software and hardware tools without the accessible versions of the print materials your teachers use in the classroom. This is why AIMVA was created, to ensure every Virginia public school teacher has a way to order accessible versions of student textbooks, reading books, and teacher-made materials.
Thank you, Matt. And so if you go to the next slide. So just to give you a bit of information about AIM Virginia. So AIM Virginia is a Virginia Department of Education grant-funded service, and it's funded out of Part B of IDEA. So we work for the Department of Education, but our offices are located at the Keller Institute at George Mason University. We are an AT service, and we provide materials and supports for qualifying students in grades K through 12 and their students and their teachers, I'm sorry. AIM Virginia has a library and a production lab. That library has over 500,000 accessible instructional materials. In the production lab, what we do there is we convert textbooks, reading books, and curriculum-based materials to add accessible features to help your students with print disabilities access and use instructional materials that are needed in the classroom. We also provide training and technical assistance regarding reading technologies. We have how-to videos ranging from short minute clips to 1-hour webinars. And then, of course, if you need that personal assistance, that one-on-one assistance, you can always contact the help desk. And we can definitely set up training, that one-on-one training for you as well, or just walk you through the steps on how to order accessible instructional materials for your students. And on the next slide, what you'll see is, our contact information. So if you want to reach out to us and just set something up, you can definitely do that. And just for purposes of time, I did have just a few sheets to show you, but I don't want to take up too much time, Matt, I'm sorry. But I will encourage you all to definitely go back to that link that Matt pointed out earlier, the UDL AT link, and just play around with those resources. I definitely encourage you to do that, and just to see, how you can support your students with AT. And then, of course, contact AIM Virginia so that we can help you make your materials accessible, because this is a free service to you all. Just wanted to plug that in. So thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. We always like to hear the word free
Absolutely.
with that. And I know this is again something. Oh, Julie had a raised hand. Julie, did you have a question, or did you accidentally hit a button? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I had a question. In the past, I've had difficulty getting having kids qualify on their IEP to get AIM services. What are the qualifications? Can we get this service, or does it have to be a qualified student?
Yeah, it has to, the student has to be eligible. And so to be eligible, the student has to have a documented print disability. And the student also obviously has to have an IEP. And so if you want information about that, so we don't provide this to students with 504s.
Yeah, no, I'm a special ed teacher, but I've only had one student in my 20 years who qualified, and that was because her parents had her medically diagnosed with dyslexia.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so they know.
So my kids who read at a first and second grade level don't qualify because they don't have a medical diagnosis.
Right. So you no longer, we no longer require a medical diagnosis. And what I can do is I can connect with you offline. I'll also encourage you to go to the AIM Virginia website, and there you will find detailed information on the eligibility requirements, but you no longer need a medical diagnosis to qualify.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great question.
Yeah, good question. I know that has been a sticking point for a while, and a barrier that folks have had to work through for that. But that changed fairly recently, right, Nikki? A year, maybe two ago. That COVID, we sort of just blank out last year.
Right. Yeah.
With that. But yeah, the medical diagnosis necessity is no longer a part of that. So we've been encouraging folks in our regions, in Region 6 and 7 here in Southwest Virginia around tech, if they had been running up against those issues previously with accessing AIM resources, to give it another try, because it is different now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And if I can just add a little marketing tool there too, a marketing moment. The folks at AIM Virginia are so responsive to questions, and they have traveled, endlessly across the state to school divisions to share their resources and provide training. So I would also endorse calling on them and asking your questions, because we think AIM Virginia resources are underutilized. Thanks.
Absolutely. And one thing I will brag on them a little bit too. This is something that, Nikki might not want to hear this, but I know that one of the big things that, and maybe she does want to hear this, that I know teachers in our region, secondary teachers, middle school teachers, and in elementary teachers, all of them, that when they get access to AIM Virginia, that opens up access to Bookshare and to Learning Ally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the libraries of accessible books, textbooks, books for reading, books for, you can find anything on Bookshare. It got 500,000 different titles in different formats available on Bookshare. And then, learning, it's free. If you get into Bookshare, it's free. And AIM is your key, the doorway into that. Learning Ally is not free. It is a paid for service, but if your student is eligible now under these criteria through AIM Virginia, then Learning Ally is still part of that package. Is that right still, Nikki?
Correct. That is correct. Yes.
Oh, okay. And are there any other tools, and not to put you on the spot, are there any other tools? But now I'm asking questions because I have to hear. Are there any other tools right now that AIM that is providing or looking at as far as reading besides those two? Am I missing anything?
We're also working with Snap and Read. So we have a partnership with Snap and Read. And again, if anyone wants more information about that, like how that actually works, please contact the help desk.
Mhm.
Yes.
There you go. So Snap and Read as well. So it is a gateway to a lot of these things. And you, Julie, I saw your comment. Yeah, Bookshare is open, and if you have a student with visual impairments, a lot of times I've seen students go directly into Bookshare that way, and you can. But I know AIM is a gateway here in Virginia for being able to do that. So, Nikki, we appreciate you being here. And I don't know if anybody, Julie, if you had a question, if you guys wanted to connect more offline, as Nikki said, maybe you can drop a email in the chat box or something like that for us to be able to get you guys connected in doing that and answer more questions you might have. All right, we told you number one would be the long one, and it was, because it had the knowledge and the resources, because that's that big first hurdle to getting teachers using AT with their students, including it in their classroom, is knowing about it, what it is when they see it on the IEP, and where they can get more information about how it works and what it's supposed to be doing. The next steps are a little shorter, at least in terms of us talking about them. They may take a little bit longer time for you to apply them than some of the others. But step two is about evaluating it. So once you know what's in your students' IEP, and whether they're using accessible instructional materials or something like Snap and Read or writing AT to be able to do that, it's time to evaluate it as co-teachers together in looking at this and saying, is this working for them to help support them meeting the goals that we have and the activities that we're doing. And I'd suggest to you, not only when this process in evaluating the student, but also taking this point in time to evaluate you as the educational professionals and related service providers and folks that may be involved. Do you know enough about what they're doing and how you can help them in moving through the process? So take time to evaluate what your students are using. And then, as I told you, it was going to be shorter as we get that ball rolling initially, and then it's going to go much quicker. Steps 3, 4, and 5 smack of UDL to me and universal design of learning. And Sharon's going to talk to you about this part again and how you can incorporate this into your classroom overall.
All righty. And UDL is such a great planning tool for co-teachers, co-planning together. It's a really, and so I'm sure lots of you know about UDL. Matt, can we pop to the next slide to find out how much you do know about universal design for learning, and not to be confused with UBD, but what do you know about UDL? And just take your annotation tools and let's see where you fall with your familiarity. Oh, good, you're in the right place. Oh, good, we have some experts on using UDL. Some are pretty new. Oh, the expert removed herself. You reevaluated there. Okay, great. Well, it's good to see that some of you, are familiar with the term, and some are moderately familiar with the term and wanting to learn more. So thank you, Dennis, for telling us about where to find those annotation tools. Okay, well, let's move on to the next slide there then. Thanks for sharing where you are. Okay, let's see. So UDL is, just tell you a little bit about the history of UDL. So UDL is a term, well, universal design, which is part of UDL, is a term that came from the architectural field. And it was, as I mentioned, it's universal design. And that means to design architectural features to meet the needs of as many users as possible. So there are curb cuts that are designed for people in wheelchairs originally, but now they're used by everybody, from people with shopping carts to parents pushing strollers. And I know I use the curb cuts regularly. There are also some other universal design features, such as, when they paint those neon yellow on the curbs to mark where the curbs are, or creating high contrast signs for, folks on the street. Another term is universal instructional design. And we're not going to get into that too much, but I brought it up because I would argue that cell phones these days, Matt, you talked about some technology earlier in your little talk about some of the specific features for that. that. But when you think about cell phones and universal instructional design, they were designed to meet a wide group of users, not necessarily designed for our individuals with disabilities, but there are so many built-in features such as text-to-speech, speech recognition, and magnification that meet the needs of all people, including those with disabilities. Oh, Patricia, I see you just finished a course, so you can jump in here and help explain some of this as well. So almost 30 years ago, CAST, which was then called the Center for Applied Special Technology, was developed, and they began working to help learners with disabilities gain access to the general education curriculum. And originally they focused on helping individuals with disabilities, I hate to say, they kind of word it, overcome their disabilities and use AT tools such as spell checkers, low and high tech tools, and skill building software so they can learn within the general education curriculum. But then they shifted to realize that the burden of adaptation should be on adapting the curricula, including the environment, not adapting the learner. So in the early 1990s, CAST began to research, develop, and articulate the principles and practices of universal design for learning. And that's when they shifted their name to just be called CAST. And you can go to cast.org, of course, to learn more information. So UDL is a framework, as we can see here, designed before accommodation. It's a framework for designing instruction prior to making individual accommodations. And it's an approach to learning and teaching that gives all students an equal opportunity to succeed. So the goal of UDL is to use a variety of teaching methods to remove any barriers to learning. It's about building in flexibility that can be adjusted for every person's strengths and interests and needs. So the best thing about UDL is that it allows you to align students' abilities and preferences with your learning goals, which increases accessibility for all. I'm looking at the time here and seeing that we have only about 5 minutes left on this. So I may, instead of going into deeper explanation, which I think is so critically important, refer you to some of these resources here. There are the three primary principal networks: the network of engagement, representation, action, and expression. And again, this is based in neuroscience, and this is the underlying framework for UDL. This slide really shows those three strategic brain networks, and this is a resource that can be found on cast.org, and there are all kinds of checkpoints on this document here for showing how you can embed multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, action, and expression within your co-planning and within your instruction. I really hate not to spend a lot of time on this, but you can see that AT is really, really important under the area of action and expression. And we just want to encourage you to think about those ways that you can engage your students. It's so critical that they are provided opportunities to manipulate, to act out scenarios, to draw, to use art. And we know that some students are more engaged in small group, large group work, that sort of thing. And then multiple means of representation, again, critical. And Matt already talked about some AT that you can use to engage all of your students in representation and engagement and action and expression. So here is a quick little slide that shows 5 examples of universal design for learning in the classroom, and really targeting those goals, offering choice to students, offering flexible classroom spaces for students, and then we have a little picture of clickers. It reminds us that how important assessment is for students, not only just you getting information from students, but students giving you information about how their learning style fit. And then read and write. We were going to show that earlier, but we run out of time there. But it's just another reminder how important digital text is for our students. And Matt, you can move on. So this is a really great UDL co-planning lesson tool here. You can find this on Understood. It was developed by Understood for All, and it's understood.org. You can go there and use this as you are, co-planning, co-teachers together to think about UDL. Great questions there. Matt, there's another page to it. So the second page of it, and then moving on to the next one. Okay. I think we went backwards. There we go. So boiling down the lesson planning with UDL, you really want to be proactive in using UDL. I apologize for not being able to really get deeper into the content about that, but it is such an important planning tool and framework for designing your lessons. You want to address those potential barriers and learner variabilities, which we know now we have students with so many variabilities in their learning styles, and then focusing on the learning destination. So starting with those goals in mind, and then planning from there to meet the needs of all of your students. Okay, so by implementing UDL, we know that 13% of our population have disabilities and IEPs that address those specific needs. But by implementing UDL, you will impact 100% of your students when you provide supports for those with disabilities. You provide supports for all students with learning variabilities. So we just wanted to mention that. Got 2 minutes, Matt.
Thanks, Sharon. We'll wrap it up. And just remember the AT and UDL group who started 7 minutes late so everybody could go to the bathroom, still got you out on time. Just remember us. So as our thank you, just promise us that when you go through this process of implementing UDL and AT with your students, that you won't forget to reflect at the end of it and go back and revise your instruction using some questions such as this to work together with your co-teacher and answer questions and revise what needs to be revised and go through. This is something that we often miss as instructional professionals. I know I did myself as well, and wish I had spent more time on reflection and revision and going through this. And if you feel overwhelmed by all the information that you have seen today, know that the AT network is out there. Also know that I need to take my daughter to gymnastics later today, as you see my shared screen up there. Probably not a surprise to some of you to do that, but please reach out to the AT network when you need help in this area. We have resources like this guide on our website, and our smiling faces like myself and Sharon and Nikki are always available to help you as well. And attached to the presentation, we have these links, including a teacher's guide to UDL, that UDL lesson planning guide, a link again to the AT Tools Playground website, and the UDL overall educational technology guide that we hope you'll take these resources back with you to the classroom when you get there. And Kim, I think that is all from us.
Wow, you did it. 12 on the dot. And I am going, thank you, Matt and Sharon and Nikki. This is a topic dear to my heart. I am so glad that you shared information and are concerned at a statewide level of the underusage of assistive technology in Ames, Virginia in particular. It's something we really need to work on. So I thank you for a great presentation and all the resources. I know folks will find them really helpful. Now I'm going to